Hello and welcome to the VCE 20th Century Remote Teaching Podcast. In this episode, we look at Hitler becoming Chancellor. So Nazi membership had grown from about 27,000 in 1925 to about 108,000 in 1929. From the 1930s, the Nazis did make quite significant electoral gains in the Reichstag elections, and they became a bit more of a political presence. Voters were increasingly supporting the anti-democratic parties of either left or right. So politics was kind of splitting. As the economic situation in Germany got worse, people were more attracted to those extreme elements. So by 1932, the Weimar Republic basically was in a crisis. So they couldn't cobble together a coalition, and as we have looked at before, the makeup of all the minor parties meant there was inevitably going to be political chaos. So unable to build a coalition meant that parties, struggled to form a majority government. So following the 1932 election, President Hindenburg offered Hitler the position of Vice-Chancellor. So this he rejected. Obviously, he loves first place. So he believed that he was entitled to be a chancellor and have that more powerful position. So he had the largest party at the time in the Reichstag, and so thought that he was owed the position. So at this stage, the Nazi Party support was kind of dropping off a little bit in the electorate, because the economy was improving. So some of Hitler's supporters were pretty cranky by his refusal to actually take that vice-chancellor position, and they saw this as the greatest hope for the Nazi Party. However, Hitler sort of bought his time, and his instincts were quite correct. So after the failure of other chancellors to basically to cobble together a government, Hindenburg was persuaded to appoint Hitler as chancellor by some of the conservative forces, and they believed that he could be controlled and manipulated. They thought he was a bit daft, and feared that the alternative was just continued rule by presidential decree, and there was also the threat of a communist revolution. So much of the Nazi program was quite traditional and conservative, so it did appeal to some of the old traditional conservatives. They were anti-Versailles, they were nationalists, they were a little bit anti-democratic and socialist, but Hitler became Chancellor on the 30th of January 1933. So as Chancellor, he announced some fresh elections on the 5th of March 1933, hoping he could get a three-quarter majority, which would give the Nazi Party a majority, and that would obviously help him bring in his political platform. So the SA launched a campaign of terror against their political opponents on the left, and the communists and socialists. So basically went straight after the opposition. So in the last week of the campaign, the Reichstag building in Berlin was set on fire and destroyed in quite mysterious circumstances. So a young intellectually challenged young Dutchman, a member of the Communist Party, was found on the scene. So he was charged, he confessed to arson, and he was actually guillotined. Claiming a communist uprising was imminent, Hitler basically suspended civil liberties and authorised mass arrests of major communist and democratic party members. So despite his failure to actually gain the majority that he needed, he kept going with his campaign, and he really wanted to consolidate power in the Nazi Party. So he barred communist delegates from taking their seats in the House and persuaded the Catholic Centre Party to support him with his enabling act. So this act gave Hitler complete control over Germany for 4 years. So only the 94 SDP members voted against it, and 24 of them were subsequently murdered. By the summer of 1933, all other political parties were banned. Hitler now ruled as a dictator, and he had sole power in Germany. So in order to do this, he passed some laws to consolidate Nazi rule, and basically went about trying to get the Nazification of Germany. So in 1933, there was a Civil Laws Act passed, which basically meant that anyone who was non-Aryan, translation Jewish, had grandparents to be dismissed from public employment. So if you were working in public service, schools, unis, that sort of thing, there was to be boycotting of Jewish shops and businesses was encouraged. So this was kind of the first step of his plan. Concentration camps were opened at Dachau, Sachsenhausen and Buchenwald in 1933, 36 and 37 respectively. So basically concentration camps were prison camps, and they were initially built to house political prisoners and other enemies of the state. So pretty much anyone who disagreed with Hitler at this stage, and also those of non-Aryan background. So their public role was to re-educate political prisoners. So pretty much the SS ran the camps, and people were tortured. There was mass brutality and also execution. So the next, I suppose, plank in his plan was the Nazi-run Labour Front replaced the trade unions. So workers' rights were now controlled by the DAF, they called it. The Ministry of Propaganda and Enlightenment was run by Joseph Goebbels, and he censored the arts and the press. So in 1933, Germany left the League of Nations, and in August 1934, Hitler became Commander-in-Chief of German armed forces, and he declared himself Führer, or father. In 1934, there was legislation passed basically to legalise the enforced sterilisation of those considered genetically flawed, so people who had mental illness, alcoholics, disabled, criminals, etc. And as well as that, in that year, Ernest Röhm, the leader of the SA, was assassinated under Hitler's orders. And in 1935, Germany began to rearm. So in 1935, the Nuremberg laws and the law for the protection of German blood and honour were implemented. So these laws excluded Jews from German citizenship, forbade marriage between Jews and German citizens, and outlawed the employment of German women under 45 by Jews. So this is the first plank, if you like, of Hitler's plan. As we'll see a little bit later on, there were two things going on in Germany at this time. There was one plan to eradicate non-Aryans from Germany, and the other was a territorial grab, and as we'll see, a build-up to World War II. That's all we've got time for today. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next time.